All right, it is Wednesday. It's 4:30 p.m. Central Time. It means it is time for office hours here on the Academy. This is where you learn about updates on MDT, Intune, ConfigMgr, imaging, you name it. And this is also your chance to ask questions on all of those topics. So my name is Johan. I'll be your host for the next hour here. So let the show begin. All right, then, let's get to it. Andrew is still on vacation, so you guys are stuck with me for the hour here. For those of you that joined us the previous week, where we had Frank Rojas as a guest, if you happen to miss that session, I highly recommend to go back and watch it on our YouTube channel. And while you're at it, please like and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us. Now, in terms of what's going on in the past week, I did stumble across some shiny updates that I made some notes of. So first of all, I was a friendly reminder from one of the Microsofties, Per Larson, about the company portal, that it is definitely time to upgrade that one to the new application or the new store application, because the old one will stop on June 15, which is coming up pretty quickly in pretty much about a week, or exactly a week from now. Now, if you read this tweet, you see that there are still some issues when actually replacing the old application, and there are some support cases running on that topic. But by all means, this is something you might want to look into and read up on a little bit. And as usual, we will share these links on both the YouTube channel and as well as the Academy website later on this evening. Another thing I stumbled across, and I should probably share the screen. That will be helpful. Usually I have Andrew to remind me of things like that, but now I have to try to do some multitasking on my own. But this was the post that I was referring to about updating the Autopilot application, and please do so fairly quickly. I stumbled across some folks that you might recognize. Now, long story short, me and Mike in the house, we are doing a mini course. It's a free course for the community on tips and tricks for upgrading to Windows 11. Lessons learned, notes from the field, and rumors are that these guys knows a little bit about deployment. So June 29, we start off at 9 a.m. Central Time. You can sign up on this course on the Academy. If I click the right link, you can show it, but just go to the Academy, sign up. It's free to enroll. It will be an hour and a half of a lot of deep dive technical stuff and your chance to ask us questions as well related to upgrading to Windows 11. You have about 2.5 years to do so, because in late 2025, Windows 10 will no longer receive any updates. And at that time, it's kind of a good idea to be up on Windows 11 already. So that was that. Another update I stumbled across was a pretty fantastic collection of CMPivot queries. For those of you that are new to ConfigMgr, CMPivot is a way to ask clients in real time about a lot of different things. So this particular collection I found downright amazing. A good chunk of them, 48. But if you click this MD file, it will take you right to the queries. And for example, you can search for applications that have crashed on your devices, or why not simply figure out the average boot time on a device. Because if I would go to one of my ConfigMgr servers, not that one here, but over here, go to my collections, I have two collections here with two Dell machines that I've been testing with, and I will right click and say start CMPivot. And I will run that query that I pasted in, and then go ahead and run that. And here you see the average boot times from these two devices. And as you can see, the response times are pretty okay. You can do this with thousands of devices at the same time. The result usually comes back fairly quickly, normally within a minute from all of those devices, sometimes even faster. But all in all, these were the boot times for these devices. And of course, you can review all the other example queries that is being shared here. So good stuff. I did stumble across a post here that I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but it was a script that caught my attention. Doug Vandermeer over in Europe figured out a script to help you keep WinGet apps updated, apparently through a scheduled task. But this is something that I wanted to take a look at and see what's going on. So highly recommend that you guys do the same and let me know next week what you think about it. Last week, in fact, the same day as we were doing office hours last week, meaning last Wednesday, Microsoft held a series of webinars, Ask Me Anything, so Q&A type webinars. They are all available on their YouTube channel. So for example, if you want to learn more about the new store and Windows App Management, by all means, go ahead and go to that link and check out the video from that from last week. And finally, in the news section, I was so happy to read that Microsoft Intune, the Microsoft Intune team that sponsored MMS in Minneapolis last month, they will actually join us in Miami in late October as a sponsor as well. And for those of you that attended MMS in Minneapolis last month, you know that Microsoft brought a good chunk of their product team over, allowing you to have a one-to-one chat with them and listen to their sessions. And just, it was a great experience. So it's great to see them coming back to this MMS as well. So long story short, I hope to see you in Miami in October or late October. So that was all that I had in terms of news. We had a few questions coming in already. A few people saying hi Jesse, hi Ross, hi Carol, good to see you guys again. And I have two questions coming in already. The first one was an MDT question about using something called make alias and model alias. And that is just a different way of assigning drivers during deployment. So long story short, normally when you have an MDT light touch server, you would organize your drivers on an OS level and then down to the individual modules that you have. The challenge is that vendors are not exactly equal in how they define model names. So sometimes a WMI query for a model for vendor A, say Lenovo, will work very much different than from another vendor, say Dell. And model and make alias is just a way through scripts to provide different naming recognition or naming normalizations of the model name based on the vendor. So, for example, if I work with Lenovo, I would probably ask a different product class than I would when I do with Dell. And that is stuff that you can define in MDT if you don't mind adding an extra script to it. So here on this device, I have a folder with some stuff, but I have a script add exit. And this is in VBScript, something that MDT knows by default. Of course, there is PowerShell versions of MDT as well, but in this case, I focused on the original version. But if I open that script in Notepad or whatever, you can see that based on what model or vendor it is I'm working with, I'm using different type of classes to ask for models. And what that means is that if I would go here and run a PowerShell script, I can fake a deployment. That's something I always liked about MDT, that you can do a what if I would deploy a device. If I would have deployed this device, it happened to be a Dell Optiplex 7060. I will learn in the beginning here that, let's see, the model name is indeed an Optiplex 7060. But if this had been a Lenovo, it would have sent something like a machine type. These 7 or 9 character long model names that doesn't give you the name at all. It's just a machine type that Lenovo is using. And rather down here, you would have another variable called model alias that will be set to the real name. In the Dell case, they happen to be the same. But if I would do this on a Lenovo or on a different HP machine, you will often see that the model value is actually different from the model alias value. But this is what you need to do. You need to have in your custom settings in a file, you need to add in instructions to call that script and to add in this information in the header. That's it from the configuration side. You copy the script to the scripts folder, you add this to your rules file, your custom settings in the file. Then what you have to do is to go to your sequences. And it's important before doing that over here, that you have actually named the folders to what the model alias value would be, because that's how we do the match. And then in my Windows 11 sequence here, I will go to the pre-install phase. I will go to inject drivers. Let me just open that again. And before this step, I would add in a variable. So a task sequence variable, it's driver group, or is it driver groups? I have to double check that real quick. But the value is going to be Windows 11 x64, and then you do a percent model alias percent. Because every time you do a deployment of this device, this will be translated to whatever value your model has. And as long as that name matching what you guys had here, the sequence knows to find it. Let me just double check the driver group variable real quick. I really should know, but I want to double check. Yeah, it is driver group 001. Forgot the array there. All right. So you add this one in, and then you move it just before the inject driver step. And the weird part here is you need to change this one a little bit. You need to change it to install nothing, and out of nothing, you will pick everything. This strange configuration just activates this as a filter. So you have to simply understand that that's how you need to do it. But I will give that name as well. So this is all you need to do to implement model alias exit and have a better detection of machines and drivers depending on their model name. All right. Let's see what else. Jesse is asking if we have a mini course on using Microsoft Graph with Intune. We have not. We just finished one where we had the Cloudway team, John, Chetil, Maurice, and Sandy. They did a masterclass for us as a 3-day course on using Microsoft Graph and a lot of other things. And this class is coming back at some point later this fall. We haven't yet scheduled it, but you can expect around the November-December timeframe. But we haven't done any free courses on this topic, at least not yet. There was a follow-up question from Jesse there also. Do you know a way to get bias information from Intune? Yes. Again, our friends over at MSEndpointMgr, they have published extended inventory for Intune that can collect BIOS data. So here, so it's a free workbook that you can use that depends on you creating a proactive remediation script that you run on your devices that does additional inventory, send it out to Log Analytics, and then this report is parsing that type of data. So it means that if I will go to my Intune tenant or one of my Intune tenants, where I have configured this, no, not there, but here. So this is where I have the proactive remediation scripts running for enhanced inventory. And then if I go to reports, I think I put them here. This is where you'll be able to see information about your devices and whether, for example, they have updates available from the OEM. So this is a free community solution allowing you to keep track of BIOS updates on devices. So that's pretty awesome. If you don't mind paying a bit, you probably know that if you have Defender for Endpoint, that actually does better inventory of things than Intune does by default. You will find under inventory, that will be hardware and firmware, and you will have BIOS data as well if you have any machines that needs BIOS updates. But this requires a shinier license. You need to have Defender for Endpoint, which is not exactly free, but it's pretty awesome from a security point of view. So I hope that answered that question. Let's see. Ross is asking on YouTube, hi Johan, do you have a process that you can use to track build sequences or changes like applications and patches that may have changed over time for auditing purposes? So I'm assuming that refers to actually editing the changes sequences. There is an old MDT, sequence monitoring solution from Mike Koster. It was written for originally ConfigMgr 2007 and then 2012, and it still works. even with the latest version of current branch. So if you search for something clever, monitoring, this one here, versioning and monitoring control of ConfigMgr sequences. This is just an event handler that you install on the site server. It's just a VB script that you run to do it. And once you have done that, if I would go to one of my site servers where I have that running, this one here, every time you make a tiniest change in the sequence, whatever that might be, change the description, add an application, do something, it will export that sequence to an XML file. So if I open up one of my folders here, I have a sequence monitor log file. So here I have, because sequences are really, they have their own package ID, and you can see that package ID. So each of these have their own folder here. So if I go to one of these folders, that didn't have too many changes, but this one have more. So every time you do a change, you get an export of that sequence. And of course, you can open up this in your favorite XML editor, whatever that might be, and you can view and compare changes to it. So this one is not bad if you want to have backups of your sequences or be able to track changes in them, especially if you are a team with multiple people that are working with these sequences. Because otherwise, if you accidentally delete the sequence in ConfigMgr, if you don't have a backup like this, the only way for you to get that sequence back is to restore a ConfigMgr backup, which is a fairly large operation just to restore a single task sequence. It's easy to restore an XML file. All right. There was one question from Matt on the YouTube channel. Can you please show us the best guidance to install the driver automation tool from MSEndpointMgr? Yes, absolutely. First of all, I do like to highlight that I actually had Maurice joining us here on the Academy for one of our community courses, where we spend, together with Mike Terrell, we spend an hour and a half working with these platforms, showcasing how they work, etc. And that recording is available if you wanna watch it. So no cost webinar or course that you can simply, if you don't have anything for Friday, highly recommend this one. It's a good show. But the shorthand version is the installer is fairly simple. It's an MSI that you install on typically a site server. And when you install that MSI, it's just the next finish installation. You will find that if you do it in the default location, it will end up in program files, MSEndpointMgr, and driver automation tool. And then, of course, you can either start the tool from here, or you can start it from your start menu. What this tool does, the extremely crash course version of it, it helps you create packages in ConfigMgr, BIOS updates, and driver updates. So once you have this tool, first of all, get rid of proxies, get rid of SSL inspection, get rid of firewalls. The server must be allowed to download content. Otherwise, this tool is not going to be able to download any drivers at all from the vendors, because this tool does reach out to HP, Dell, Lenovo, and download content. And the tool or the server the tool runs on must be allowed to do so. Otherwise, there will be no packages. And I've seen that a few times. But here you simply pick the models that you want. You pick whether they are drivers or BIOS or both. And then you hit start, download, and import. And this tool now takes care of downloading them, packaging them, and create driver packages here for each model, each version of Windows, etc. And it also creates BIOS packages here for each model. So that's step one. Use the driver automation tool, run the MSI, configure it, and use it to create the packages. A few recommended settings is here in ConfigMgr is to make sure to compress the packages, because it's much faster to download a compressed Vim file compared to 1,000 small files in a driver package. When you have that, you will have to create a package that contains the script that the solution includes. And then I was testing out driver updates earlier. So I have a sequence that does driver update. And this is a fairly small sequence. I'm specifying username and password to an account that is a read-only analyst in ConfigMgr that can talk to the admin service. And then I have a script that simply downloads driver packages if they are available for my devices. And then it will restart the computer. So yesterday, I had one of my Dell machines, and I simply run that sequence on it. And sure enough, it downloaded the latest driver package from ConfigMgr, updated the drivers, and rebooted. And I now have updated my drivers here. Down the road, the driver and firmware solution that Microsoft has launched this year will be available for ConfigMgr. I've been told, at least. I have no timeline, but I'm hoping it will be. But for now, this is pretty much what you have to use if you want to use driver updates in ConfigMgr. Great solution. Community has been around for 4 or 5 years now. Works very well. Let's see. It was a question from Carol. Do you know if there's a way to set the initial BIOS password on Lenovo devices during Autopilot? There are definitely WMI scripts or scripts that calls WMI that you can run on Lenovo devices to set the BIOS password. And you can have a Win32 app in Intune run a script, and you can have that application run as part of your enrollment status page in Intune. To show an example, I don't have one that sets the BIOS password for Lenovo, but I have an app that runs a script. So in my Intune applications, some of these apps, the only thing they do, if I go to the properties here, they just run a PowerShell script. But it's still a Win32 application, but it just runs a PowerShell script, in this case, a wrapper. But this could be your set password in Lenovo machines script. And then you would have to go to your, you'd have to assign that application to the same group as you assign your enrollment status page to. But when you do that, you can put that as a condition to force it to run early on in the autopilot process. There are other ways to do it, but that usually involves that you have to plug in a USB stick when you power your own device. Windows is quite good in detecting provisioning packages. You can create a provision package that runs a script, a PowerShell script that does whatever you need it to do. And that will take care of that configuration, and you can continue the device from there. So a few different options available. but you will have to figure out, of course, a script that actually sets the password. But there are examples out there on how to set the password on Lenovo machines. So I hope that helped a little bit. Otherwise, I do recognize your name from one of our courses here, so we can have a chance to chat about that next week as well. So, great question. Let's see. Neil is asking on YouTube. It looks like a follow-up question for something, but I don't see the first question. One day I will learn English. One day. I think the question is regarding peer cache and basically leaving devices on, then just shutting them down when they are completed. I mean, if you have a network that looks, that is not a network, is it? That's also not a network. That's Google Analytics. That's here. I was migrating my Google Analytics to the new GA4 platform, which we are not friends, not yet at least. That's another story. If you have a location where you deploy a bunch of machines, and they are sort of on the wrong side of a WAN link. So you have your distribution point somewhere, and you have a WAN link, and you have an office where you need to deploy a bunch of machines, say 50. If you're using peer cache requires that the entire content is available on a peer cache source for a client to pick it up. If that content is not there, the machine will go over the WAN link to the distribution point and download the stuff. So when using peer cache, you want to make sure that you deploy one machine first, or that you pre-cache content on one machine first, and then you leave that one running. Because then other machines, when you deploy them, will be able to pull the content from that one instead of reaching over the WAN link to a distribution point. So if you are deploying a bunch of machines, make sure to leave at least one behind. I would recommend you use branch cache instead of peer cache, but if you are using peer cache, please be aware of that it's pretty resource intensive on the poor machine that happen to have the content. It can become pretty much unusable. But of course, if it's a machine that you have dedicated, don't worry, nobody uses it anyway, so you can just use it for your imaging. So that is my take on that. I have written over the years a few blog posts that explains the difference between branch cache and peer cache and how they work differently when you do a lot of imaging with them. And what you will find is that branch cache is typically the winner in terms of performance and in terms of networking speed. But both will work to happily deploy Windows with peer-to-peer capability. Another post that I put together was a pre-caching post. Basically, what you can do to pre-cache content for this scenario in a ConfigMgr environment. I mean, the scenario is fairly simple. You have a location, you know you're about to deploy a bunch of PCs. Well, make sure that the content is out on at least one of them. You can do that a week before or a few weeks before, because if you do that, that can trickle down over the weekend, no problem. But then when you deploy the other 49, they will get content from a local peer rather than from or by nuking the WAN link. So I hope that answered the question somewhat. There's another question from on the YouTube channel here regarding I'm using the M365 developer program. Can I play around with log analytics? I was trying to buy an additional pay-as-you-go subscription, but that failed. I have seen both successes and failures with purchasing additional products to my M365 developer tenant. I know that my colleague Andrew, who's usually here in the office hours with me, he went through that exact process and somehow figured out a way to do that. So I may have to refer to have a chance to ask Andrew about that, because I myself, I have a real Intune tenant that I work with for all my training and demo. And I have been using EMS trial licenses though and buy things for them. But I have heard that there have been some issues when using the developer program tenant to buy additional services. So I think I would have to revert back on that question for next week. All right. There was a follow-up question regarding having a script setting the password. That would obviously at some point be in clear text. Would it pop up in any log? Depends on how you set it. ConfigMgr by default, if you have it to set variables, you can configure them to not show up in any log files. You can even configure a sequence variable to not even log the command line you ran to run something in the sequence. So you have a listing of those variables here. So there is a sequence reference, fairly long one, but in here, do not log something. Yeah. So if you enable these variables, it will not put information that you run in the command line. So you can even have, technically, you can have the password on the command line in the sequence, but it will not show up in any logs when you deploy it. So maybe something like that. Great questions today. Awesome. Any other questions? Let's see. There's another question coming in on YouTube. What if I'm using Intune and Autopilot to set the device passwords in regards to the log? That would be something you have to deal with in that script. The challenge with having everything baked in a script is even if you obfuscate the password in order to actually set it, at some point it needs to be decrypted. So you can go advanced and have a script look up something or look up something in, say, an Azure Vault or Key Vault in Azure, something like that, to make it a little bit more secure. But that is, as long as you don't add any own logging in your script, it will not log anything. And at that point, the script block logging that you normally can enable in event logs are typically never configured in an autopilot deployment. So you should be okay there from a logging point of view, unless you have some logging on your own in your scripts, I think. Any other questions? Got a comment from LinkedIn here that LinkedIn is almost a minute ahead of YouTube. Well, that's the beauty of live stream. It all depends on when they start, but we're using a platform that allows streams to 4 locations at the same time. So it's streaming out to YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, so that the same feed goes out all. And yes, sometimes they start a little bit differently depending on how busy the vendor is that we're using. That was pretty cool though. A whole minute. Any other questions? I'll be happy to answer. We have a whopping 18 minutes available. While we're waiting for new questions to come in, those of you that arrived a little bit late today, if any, I would like to highlight that me and Mike and Nias are doing a free course on the Academy on June 29th. It's all about upgrading to Windows 11, something that I have a feeling that a lot of you will be tasked with if you haven't started already by your organizations, simply because of the fact that Windows 10 is eventually expiring in about 2.5 years from now. And you may not believe me, but time tends to fly by fairly quickly, and soon enough we are there in the fall of 2025 having to deal with this. So highly recommend it. So once again, I should probably share the screen. All right, that's the one. All right. Any questions at all? Also, a question on LinkedIn. This event, will it be recorded? Absolutely, yes. We record all our mini courses, and they will be available on the platform 24 hours after the live session. But obviously, if you want to stick around and actually ask us any questions, you kind of have to attend the live session. But I understand time differences and time zones and whatnot. That may not always be an option. And then, of course, you can catch up on the recording, or if there was a demo you want to rewatch or something like that, by all means, it will be recorded. So, a question coming in on YouTube. Where on the client do you see when a feature update is installed? Same for EKB or enablement packages. I mean, if you go to any given client that you have, let's see what I have on these guys. It will give you the version after installing a feature update or an enablement package. If it doesn't, it usually indicates that something did not go well. I have seen enablement packages just fail silently. It looks like they were installed, but they really weren't, because there were some prerequisites missing, like a servicing stack update or a cumulative update, because there are requirements for enablement packages to run. If you are running into issues, the Windows Update logs can help you troubleshoot the enablement packages. And for setup exit driven, you have the setup act log file that can help you troubleshoot that one. So depending on how you do these feature updates, you have different troubleshooting options available for you. Yeah. Let's see. Question coming in on YouTube. I'll be doing sorry. I'll be doing an Intune PoC, and we are currently discussing remote help possibilities. I know that TeamViewer is an option and Intune Remote help as well. Is there anything else? Microsoft Quick Support. So the only platforms that I have seen that is integrated with Intune is indeed TeamViewer and Remote Help. Uh, I ended up for our tenant to buy the Remote Help option because we used to use TeamViewer. But for our little lab, the cost was almost $2,000 a year for those licenses. And that was a lot just for a test lab of devices. So I ended up getting the remote help licenses when they were still sold separately. Now they're part of the Intune suite, something, something. You may be able to buy them separately still. But anyhow, I bought a few of those, and they have been working quite well when we've been testing. So these are the only node together with the TeamViewer one that is fully integrated with Intune. But other than that, there are great solutions out there for remote access or remote help with devices. My favorite is probably ConnectWise because ConnectWise has an option where you can use a backdoor to the device, so you can remote in to the device at the same time as the user is using the device without interrupting them. Of course, you have an option to interact with them also if that's what you want, but sometimes you want to check an installation or troubleshoot something, then it's pretty great to be able to remote in and do the work without interrupting the users from their work. But there are many solutions out there. All right. Also, a follow-up question regarding enablement packages. Basically, you have less logging available compared to when you do a setup exit-driven process. Because when you run the setup, it logs a whole lot more. It actually runs through a complete installation of Windows, whereas an enablement packet is just enabling features that was already on the box that they just haven't been enabled yet. So it's not like a full installation of anything. They are often just tiny. I think I have one on my site server here. I was testing some upgrades. Maybe on this one. Yeah, so this is the enablement package for Windows 10 22H2. There is none for Windows 11, so at least not yet. But you see the size of it. It's just 200 kilobytes in size. And then, of course, you had a prereq. You have a servicing stack update. Bare minimum, I recommend to get a later one. And the latest update is I believe, the May update for Windows 10. But yeah, you don't have as rich troubleshooting for enablement packages as you have for setup exit-driven upgrades. The Windows Update log is a better option to troubleshoot that, or use PowerShell to get the data from it so you can actually read it, but you get the idea. Richard is asking on LinkedIn, have you done any SQL upgrades on the server housing ConfigMgr database? Yes, many times, probably 50 or so. It's a very, very straightforward process. You run a backup of everything, you stop all config manager services, and you upgrade your SQL Server and in-place upgrade for that one. There are some things to consider, but Microsoft actually has done a pretty decent job of putting that in their upgrading SQL documentation. Here. So if you go to this section here, step by step what you need to consider when you do an upgrade. But it's been very, very solid to do this. It's super simple when you have a single primary site. You're in a wee bit of trouble if you have a CAS, like a hierarchy, because then it's not just next, finish anymore. But you shouldn't have one in the first place, unless you are like super big, 150,000 clients or more. But yeah, this is it. Any other questions? Still 7 minutes left. Do you have any, question coming in on YouTube here? Do you have any insider news on updates for automated BIOS update solution? Lenovo has removed the silent extract command in the XML file for desktops, and thus this breaks the process. Not more than what has been made publicly available so far. But the let's see here. This solution that Microsoft released does BIOS updates as well. And it does it fully automated. And they are using a wrapper around the vendor tools. And this one, for all different type of vendors, is written or designed to work silently. So if there are options that are being removed today from a vendor tool, this might be a good option as well to look into and start to use. And this works today. It's just that the management tools for it are missing. So you have to manage it through PowerShell or through one of the example applications that Microsoft put together for this service. So I expect greatness for this in the next, 3, 4, 12 months, because they have been working on this for 2 years already. So my hope is that this can be like a central, common way of dealing with firmware and BIOS updates on Windows devices. There are some room for improvement on the platform, to put it mildly. But if you have a solution right now that doesn't behave the way you want it, this could be something that actually allow you to get it going. Other than that, for Lenovo, I usually pester Joe Parker a bit on Twitter when I have any questions. So I will recommend that you do the same. See if I can find his. I think he still has the Joe Lenovo handle. For it. Oh, I can't find it. Great. Well, here we are, finally. Coming up. This would be an account to ask if you have any Lenovo specific questions. Joe is actually pretty good in responding on social media, so as some of his team members, and they usually come to the MS conference and others as well. So would recommend to reach out there. Let's see, question coming in on YouTube. My management point rule has to be reinstalled, but keeps on hanging at applying permissions to program files. Any ideas? Well, first of all, do not install ConfigMgr on the C drive. That is not recommended at all, because that folder also contains all your inboxes. And if those fill up, you run out of disk space and your site server will die because of it. Other than that, for troubleshooting permissions issues like that, I would recommend simply either change the permissions of that folder or use procmon to see what it is that is preventing the setup from running. Often you will find it could be antivirus software blocking it, or that doesn't have exclusions configured for that folder. But that's probably where I would start if I would see permission issues when trying to install it. Grant additional permissions or use procmon to see what permissions it's being asked for. Because when you run a procmon trace and you put in a filter, see if I have it available here somewhere. You put a filter for something. In this case, I was troubleshooting a web service. Every time you try to do something to that folder, whatever folder I had a filter to look for. Let's see, this one here. If I would try to read that file, that the copy and paste did not work very well. It will log that type of access here, and you will often see details on what type of access it needed in these results. So use something like that, set a filter for the folder, and try to get an idea on what's going on. This little tool has saved my life so many times in terms of troubleshooting. Worth mentioning, I saw the follow-up comment there. You can restore a ConfigMgr backup into a different folder. So if someone installed a site system on the wrong volume, in this case the C drive, you can actually make a backup and you can restore it to a different folder on the same server. It's a supported configuration, has been for a few years now. All right. Dang, that hour flew by pretty quick. Thank you everyone for joining today. Andrew should be back next week. And other than that, thank you for all the good questions. I hope to see you on June 29 for our Windows 11 upgrade mini course. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much.